Welcome to Hidden Wounds. My name is Arthur Pendleton, and I need you to pay close attention to the story I'm about to share. At 65, with silver at my temples and a gold watch from my late wife that has marked 40 years of my life, I believed I had witnessed every form of deceit this world could conjure. I was mistaken. It was a quiet Tuesday in September. My 7-year-old grandson Leo was nestled in my lap as I read him his nightly story. The house was filled with that particular kind of silence you find only in homes steeped in old money and even older secrets. My son, Robert, and his wife, Christine, had departed that morning for what they claimed was a business trip to Miami, entrusting me with Leo for the week. They called it watching him, as if I were some local teenager earning a little spending money, and not the man who had single-handedly raised Robert after his mother passed away. Not the man who had painstakingly built the very fortune they were now so impatient to inherit. Leo's small fingers lightly traced the face of the watch on my wrist, the one my beloved wife gave me for our 25th anniversary. "Grandpa," he said, his voice imbued with the unfiltered honesty only a child can possess. "They didn't really go on a business trip." I placed the book on the end table. My heart began to beat faster, but I kept my voice calm and even. "What do you mean by that, little man?" He looked up at me, his eyes a startling blue, my wife's eyes, not the calculating gaze of his father. "I heard Mommy on the phone with someone. She told them they went away to get all your money before you. He fumbled with the words, too heavy for his young mind. "Before I what, Leo?" "Before you die and give it away to somebody else." The words hung in the profound silence of the room, stark and chilling. A cold, sharp sensation settled deep in my chest. It wasn't the ache of a broken heart, but something far more potent. Clarity. With hands that did not tremble, I tucked Leo into his bed, gave him a kiss on his forehead, and then made my way downstairs to pour a glass of bourbon. It was a 1987 vintage, the year Robert graduated from university. The year I mistakenly believed I had raised a man of integrity. As I stood in my kitchen, enveloped by the tangible results of a lifetime of deliberate decisions, the full gravity of their betrayal washed over me. They hadn't just left me to babysit. They had left me to play the part of a fool. But in their avarice to seize my legacy, Robert and Christine had overlooked a crucial detail. I didn't amass this wealth through naivety. I didn't endure 20 years as a widower by being fragile. And I certainly didn't manage my wife's family business empire while raising a son by being a man who could be casually brushed aside. I walked over to the window, gazing out at the garden my wife had planted for me 4 decades ago. The late-season roses were still in bloom, defying the encroaching chill of autumn. Some things, I mused, grow stronger just when others expect them to fade. That night, I arrived at a decision that would alter the course of our lives. I would not engage in a confrontation. There would be no pleading, no tears, no attempt to comprehend their motives. I would do what I've always done when faced with a threat. I would defend what is mine with the same methodical and ruthless precision I used to build it. They wanted to perceive me as a relic of a past era, someone whose only remaining purpose was to die at a convenient time. Fine. Let them underestimate the relic. I finished my drink and went upstairs. As I passed Leo's room, I heard his soft, even breathing. He was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that he had just ignited the fuse on an explosive that would irrevocably reshape our family. In my bedroom, I opened the safe concealed behind my wedding portrait. Inside was an old leather-bound address book filled with contacts most people would do anything to have. Tomorrow, I would commence the systematic deconstruction of my son's future. But tonight, I would sleep more soundly than I had in years, because for the first time, I had absolute clarity about who was worthy of my legacy and who was deserving of my wrath. They thought they were excising me from their lives. In reality, they had just severed themselves from mine. The game was about to start, and they were completely oblivious that they were even players. People tend to see what they expect to see. And for years, when people looked at Arthur Pendleton, they saw an elegant widower, aging gracefully in a world that often discards men of my generation. They saw the impeccably styled silver hair, the tailored suits, the quiet confidence that wealth affords. They saw a grandfather who remembered birthdays and told bedtime stories. They never saw the steel beneath the surface. That has always been my greatest strength. At 65, I have learned that the quiet dignity people associate with age is a form of camouflage. They see a benevolent patriarch, not the strategist underneath. I have kept my mind sharp through discipline, work, and a cold resolve that preserves a man better than any false hope. My posture is still erect, my gaze still firm, my handshake still capable of commanding respect from men half my age. But it's the mind behind the calm demeanor that makes me formidable. I wasn't always this way. When I married my wife at 25, I was an idealist, filled with trust and a belief in the inherent goodness of people. I believed that decency was always reciprocated, that family was synonymous with loyalty, that love could overcome any obstacle the beautiful fictions young men tell themselves. Life disabused me of those notions. My wife passed away when Robert was just 12, leaving me to manage a family business I barely understood, with predators circling from every direction. Her former business partners attempted a buyout for a pittance. Her extended family hinted that I might be more at ease in a more modest home. Even the board of directors questioned my ability to maintain my position as a widower. That was the moment I discovered my true mettle. I didn't just learn the business. I revolutionized it. I didn't just hold on to our home. I acquired 3 more properties. I didn't just preserve my social standing. I became the man others sought out for assistance they couldn't find elsewhere. In doing so, I cultivated a certain reputation. To cross Arthur Pendleton was not just to lose. It was to vanish from the circles that mattered. I could dismantle a career with a single phone call. I could bankrupt a rival with a quiet word. I made those who misjudged me deeply regret their error. However, I was always meticulous about confining that reputation to my professional life. At home, with Robert, I was the devoted father. I told myself I was shielding him, keeping him untainted by the harsh realities of power and survival. I see now that it was a weakness. I should have taught him the consequences that befall those who bite the hand that feeds them. I recall the precise moment I realized Robert needed to learn this lesson. It was 3 years ago, at Christine's birthday party. She was holding court with her friends, remarking on how traditional I was, how I failed to grasp modern life. She let out that tinkling laugh she believed was so charming and said, "Poor Arthur still thinks he's relevant. Someone ought to tell him the world has moved on." I smiled that evening. I praised her dress. I presented her with a lavish gift, but I also made a mental note. Christine Walsh, soon to be Christine Pendleton, needed to be taught a lesson in respect. I just never imagined my own son would be standing by her side, nodding in agreement with her dismissal of my relevance. That's when I knew this day would inevitably arrive. The day I would be forced to choose between being the doting grandfather and being the man who had forged an empire from ashes. the day I would have to show them what old-fashioned truly means when it's backed by 40 years of accumulated power and an absolute deficit of patience for disrespect. Standing in my quiet kitchen the morning after Leo's revelation, my reflection looked back at me from the window pane. Silver at the temples, perfectly combed, a crisp shirt, eyes that had witnessed too much to ever be taken by surprise again. They believed I was a spent force. They thought I was just a distinguished relic, quietly awaiting my end. Allow me to show them what a spent force can do. The next morning, I performed the duties of any dedicated grandfather. I made Leo pancakes, listening to his cheerful stories about school as my mind meticulously processed the consequences of his innocent disclosure. "Grandpa, you seem different today," Leo observed, a drop of syrup on his chin. "Different how, little man?" Like you're concentrating really hard on something important." A perceptive boy, far too perceptive for his parents' own good. After dropping Leo off at school, I commenced my inquiry. It wasn't the kind that required private investigators or theatrical showdowns, but the kind that capitalized on 40 years of carefully nurtured relationships and scrupulous record-keeping. My first call was to Eleanor Vance, my long-standing attorney. Eleanor had managed our family's legal matters since before Robert was born, and her confidentiality was the stuff of legend. "Arthur, my dear, what can I do for you?" "Eleanor, I need to know if there have been any inquiries regarding my estate planning. Specifically, has my son been in touch with your firm?" The brief hesitation on her end spoke volumes. "Arthur, I'm not at liberty to discuss." "Eleanor," my voice was firm, carrying the weight of our decades-long association. "This is my estate. I am not asking you to breach client privilege. I am asking you to protect your primary client." Another pause. "Robert and Christine visited me 3 weeks ago. They had inquiries about succession planning, about the protocol should you become incapacitated." Incapacitated, the sterile clinical term for what they were hoping would befall me, sooner rather than later. "What sort of inquiries?" "They wanted to understand the probate timeline, the tax liabilities of an inheritance, and whether the process could be expedited if you needed long-term care." Long-term care. They weren't merely waiting for me to die. They were actively planning to have me declared incompetent. "Eleanor, I need you to draft new documents. A complete overhaul of my estate plan, and it needs to be done with the utmost discretion." "Arthur, are you certain?" "This feels precipitous. I have never been more certain of anything in my life." My second call was to Markham Cole at First National Bank, where the Pendleton family had held accounts for over 30 years. Markham owed his current executive position to a recommendation I had made after his predecessor attempted to foreclose on a property I was keen to acquire. "Mr. Pendleton, what a pleasure. Markham, I need to discuss some modifications to my account structures, specifically the joint accounts I share with Robert." "Of course. What changes did you have in mind?" "I want them terminated. All of them. Today." The third call was the most critical. Susan Hayes, my realtor, the woman who had facilitated my acquisition of half the prime real estate in this city over the last 2 decades. "Arthur, I hope you're calling about another investment." "Susan, I require 3 things, handled with absolute confidentiality. First, a complete market valuation of my primary residence. Second, I need you to discreetly contact collectors who might be interested in high-value antiques and artwork. Third, I need secure, climate-controlled storage facilities available immediately." "Arthur, You're not considering selling the family home, are you? I'm considering a great many things, Susan. How quickly can you get this done? By midday, I had initiated a series of actions that would methodically strip away everything Robert and Christine believed they were entitled to. But this was about more than just money. It was about power, respect, and the fundamental issue of who would control the Pendleton legacy. I picked Leo up from school that afternoon and treated him to ice cream, watching his face illuminate as he recounted his day. This boy deserved more than parents who taught him that love was contingent on an inheritance, that family was just another form of opportunism. "Grandpa," he said as we sat in the park, "are Mommy and Daddy coming back soon?" "Yes, little man. They'll be home in a few days." "Will they be happy to see us?" I looked at this innocent child, the one person in my family who loved me without considering my net worth, and made another decision that would transform all our lives. "Leo, how would you feel about spending more time with Grandpa? Maybe even having your own special room at my house?" His face lit up like it was Christmas morning. "Really? Could I bring all my books?" "You could bring anything you desire, little man. Anything at all." That evening, with Leo asleep, I sat in my study surrounded by a sea of legal documents, financial reports, and property titles. My wife's portrait seemed to watch over me from the mantelpiece, and I could almost hear her voice in my mind. "Arthur, you're playing with fire. But some things are meant to burn. And some people need to learn that when you attempt to dethrone a king, you had better not miss." Robert and Christine wanted to seize everything I had built. Very well. When they returned from their treacherous trip to Miami, they would find out exactly what everything entailed, and precisely how much they had forfeited by underestimating the man who created it all. Thursday night, 11:47 p.m. Leo was sound asleep upstairs. I was in my late wife's study, a glass of bourbon in hand, looking at a list of names that represented 40 years of carefully cultivated alliances. It was time to make the calls that would alter everything. First, Eleanor Vance, my attorney. Yes, it was midnight. Yes, she picked up on the second ring. When you've been someone's counsel for 2 decades, handling their most confidential affairs, you answer their call, regardless of the hour. "Arthur, is something wrong?" "Eleanor, regarding the estate revision we discussed, I need it fast-tracked. A complete disinheritance of Robert and Christine. Everything is to be placed in a trust for Leo, with me as the trustee until he turns 30. Arthur, this is a monumental step. Are you absolutely sure?" "I have never been more sure." "How fast can you draft the papers?" "If it's an emergency, I can have them ready for your signature by tomorrow afternoon." "Make it so." Second call, Markham Cole at the bank. I had saved his career years ago. Now he could help me preserve my legacy. "Mr. Pendleton, it's quite late." "Markham, I need to request an emergency freeze on all accounts on which Robert has signing privileges. I want them locked, pending an investigation into unauthorized access." "An investigation? Has there been a security breach?" "Let's just call it a protective measure." "How long will it take to execute?" "I can have it done by the time the banks open in the morning." "But Arthur, this will cause significant problems for Robert." "That is precisely the intention." Third call, Susan Hayes. Susan understood wealth in a way that transcended mere transactions. She knew that real power lay in the ability to make assets vanish more quickly than anyone could lay claim to them. "Arthur, please tell me, this is about acquiring something magnificent and not about dismantling something precious." "Susan, how quickly can you liquidate art and antiques without drawing unwanted attention?" For the most valuable items, with discretion, 2 weeks. For the rest, a month. But Arthur, your collection, it represents decades of careful curation. My collection represents decades of investment. It's time to cash in. And Susan, I need movers. Professional, discreet, and available tomorrow. Fourth call. This was to a name on my list that very few people knew existed. Victor Nash, private investigator, formerly with the FBI, now a specialist in making problems vanish, legally and permanently. Mr. Pendleton, it's been a while. Victor, I need a complete financial workup. My son and daughter-in-law. Every account, every liability, every hidden asset. I want a portfolio suitable for a courtroom. Timeline, 1 week. Budget, unlimited. The final call was the most important. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the psychiatrist who had helped me navigate Robert's tumultuous teenage years and who understood the complex dynamics of family manipulation. Arthur, this is a surprise. Evelyn, I need an evaluation. A psychological assessment of my mental state. Something that will be ironclad if anyone dares to question my decision-making abilities. Arthur, what is going on? What's going on, Evelyn, is that I'm about to teach my son the most expensive lesson of his life, and I need to ensure no one can claim I wasn't of sound mind while I did it. By 3:00 a.m., I had triggered a chain reaction of events that would systematically divest Robert and Christine of everything they assumed was their birthright. More than that, I had begun the process of demonstrating what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I went upstairs to check on Leo, sleeping peacefully in the guest room that would soon be his permanent bedroom. This child would inherit what his parents had squandered through their own greed and betrayal. He would learn that family loyalty is earned, not inherited, and that respecting your elders isn't just an old-fashioned notion, it's a survival skill. Standing at my bedroom window, looking out over the city where I had built an empire while my son learned only how to take it for granted, I felt a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Robert and Christine believed they were cutting me out of their future. They had no idea they had just cut themselves out of mine. Tomorrow, the hard work would begin. But tonight, for the first time since my wife's passing, I slept with the deep satisfaction of a man who knows exactly what he is about to dismantle and precisely why it deserves to be brought down. They wanted my house, my money, my legacy. They would return to find nothing but echoes and empty rooms, and they would learn that when you try to bury a phoenix, you had better be certain it's well and truly dead. Friday morning was greeted by crisp autumn sunlight and the sound of Leo's laughter, which echoed through rooms that would soon hold nothing but memories of love and loss. I watched him eat his breakfast scrambled eggs, the way his grandmother used to make them, and I marveled at how such pure innocence could exist in a world so full of calculating adults. "Grandpa, when are Mommy and Daddy getting back?" Leo asked, his legs dangling from the tall kitchen stool. "Sunday, little man. Just 2 more days. Are we going to do something special today?" I looked at this child, truly looked at him, 7 years old, with my late wife's eyes and a heart that had not yet learned to measure love in currency. He was the only good thing Robert and Christine had ever created together, and likely the only thing they had ever created without first weighing its financial benefit. "Yes, Leo, we are going to do something very special today. We're going to make sure you are always looked after, no matter what." "What do you mean?" "Well," I said, taking the stool next to him and choosing my words with care, "sometimes adults make decisions that aren't very wise. And when that happens, it's up to other adults to make sure the children are kept safe. Leo nodded with a solemnity that seemed beyond his years. Like how you looked after Daddy when Grandma died. The question struck me with the force of a physical blow. Yes, exactly like that. Except this time, I'm protecting you from your daddy instead of protecting your daddy from the world. Something like that, little man. That morning, our first destination was Eleanor Vance's law office. While she finalized the legal documents that would secure Leo's future and surgically remove his parents from mine, I sat with him in the elegantly appointed waiting room, reading him stories and watching him color, his focus as intense as his grandfather's had been when building our fortune. Mr. Pendleton. Eleanor appeared from her office holding a thick stack of papers that represented the complete reorganization of everything I had spent 4 decades creating. Everything is prepared for your signature. The documents were exhaustive. The complete disinheritance of Robert and Christine, the establishment of an irrevocable trust for Leo, with me as the sole trustee until his 30th birthday, and clauses that would make any legal challenge not only arduous but financially catastrophic for anyone who attempted it. The trust has protective stipulations, Eleanor explained in a low voice, while Leo happily drew at the far end of the conference table. If anyone challenges these terms, they automatically forfeit any visitation rights with the beneficiary. If anyone tries to manipulate or coerce Leo about his inheritance, they could face criminal charges. I signed each page with the same steady hand that had once signed my marriage license, Leo's birth announcement, and my wife's death certificate. The most significant moments in life often occur with no more drama than the stroke of a pen on paper. Our next stop was the bank, where Markham Cole had arranged the account restructuring that would render Robert and Christine's Miami machinations utterly irrelevant. Every joint account was closed, every line of credit suspended, every automatic transfer halted. "Leo, would you like to open your very own bank account?" I asked. His eyes widened. "Really? My own?" "Your very own. With your very own money inside." We opened the account with an initial deposit of 50 more money than many families see in a year, but only a fraction of what Leo would one day inherit. I wanted him to learn that money was a tool, not a deity, and that it brought with it responsibilities as well as privileges. That afternoon, we went to the storage facility that Susan had secured. To Leo, it was a grand adventure, watching as a team of movers meticulously transported 40 years of accumulated treasures into climate-controlled units across the city. Art, antiques, jewelry, rare books, everything Robert and Christine had likely already accounted for in their minds. "Grandpa, why are we putting everything into boxes?" "Because sometimes we have to put precious things in a safe place while we figure out what to do next." "Are you giving them to me?" I knelt down to his eye level, looking into his innocent face that held complete trust in me. "Some of them, little man. The ones that will have meaning for you when you're older. The ones that have stories about your grandmother and the life we created together. What about the other ones?" "The other ones will help ensure you can attend any university you choose, live anywhere in the world you want, and never have to be anxious about money the way some people are." That evening, as the movers continued to empty the house of its valuable contents, Leo and I sat in his room, now barren except for his bed and toys. I told him stories about his grandmother, about how we met, how we built our business together, and how she loved this house and filled it with beautiful objects because she wanted our family to be surrounded by beautiful memories. Will Mommy and Daddy be sad that the pretty things are gone? The question was guileless, yet it sliced directly to the core of my actions. Would they be sad? Or would they simply be furious that their expected inheritance had vanished? Leo, sometimes people begin to care more about things than they do about the people who gave them those things. Your mommy and daddy forgot something very important. What did they forget? They forgot that love isn't something you can deposit in a bank or sell to the highest bidder. They forgot that family means taking care of one another, not waiting for someone to die so you can claim their possessions. He nodded as if this was perfectly logical, which perhaps it was to a child who had not yet been taught the art of greed. Grandpa, will you always take care of me? Always, little man. That's what grandfathers are for. Later that night, after Leo was asleep, I walked through the house that had been our family's home for 3 decades. The empty room seemed to echo with the ghosts of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, and family dinners that were once filled with laughter instead of measured silences. On Sunday, Robert and Christine would return to find not just empty rooms, but empty bank accounts, an empty inheritance, and the one thing they never seemed to value, unconditional love, now redirected to the person who truly deserved it. I had salvaged the only thing worth saving from this family. Everything else was just expensive rubble. Saturday morning unfolded with the precision of a military campaign. By 8:00 a.m., specialized teams moved through my house like a perfectly synchronized army, each with clear directives and a commitment to absolute discretion. Leo observed the organized chaos with wide-eyed wonder, not grasping that he was witnessing the methodical demolition of his parents' future. Grandpa, why are there so many people here? They're helping us get reorganized, little man. Sometimes you need to take everything apart to put it back together the right way. The art appraiser, a sharp woman named Isabelle Dubois, who had helped me procure many of the pieces, was the first to arrive. She oversaw the careful wrapping and cataloging of each painting and sculpture, each item representing not just a monetary value, but years of my late wife's passion for filling our home with beauty. Arthur, this is a museum, quality collection. Are you absolutely certain about liquidation? I'm certain about protecting it from people who would sell it to fund vacations and luxury cars. Next came the jewelry specialist, who assessed pieces that marked the milestones of my marriage anniversary gifts, celebratory acquisitions. My wedding band remained on my finger. That was sacred. Everything else was appraised, documented, and secured. Mr. Pendleton, the total appraised value is staggering. The diamond pieces alone. I don't need the numbers. I need the security. Meanwhile, Susan orchestrated the removal of the furniture with the efficiency of someone who understood that we weren't just moving possessions. We were erasing the evidence of 40 years of family life. The dining table where we had shared thousands of meals, the living room sofa where Leo learned to walk, the beds, the chairs, the accumulated comfort of a lifetime, all of it taken away. Leo pitched in by packing his own toys, treating it as a game instead of the demolition it was. He was too young to comprehend that his parents would return to hollow rooms and echoing spaces where their inheritance once resided. Mr. Pendleton, one of the movers asked, what about the kitchen items? I looked at the copper pots my wife had given me for our 10th anniversary, the china we used for every holiday meal, the crystal glasses that had toasted every family milestone. Everything goes. Leave a basic set of dishes and cookware for the weekend. The rest gets stored. By afternoon, the house was stripped down to its framework. Rooms that once radiated wealth and taste now showcased only expensive emptiness. The sound of our footsteps was different, hollow, like the sound money makes when it vanishes. But the most crucial work wasn't the physical removal of objects. It was happening in banks, law firms, and investment houses across the city, where 40 years of meticulous financial planning was being systematically rerouted away from Robert and Christine and toward Leo. Markham called with updates every couple of hours. All joint accounts terminated. New accounts established under the trust. Investment portfolios transferred. Mr. Pendleton, as of Monday morning, your son will have no access to any family funds. Eleanor reported similar progress. Estate documents have been filed. The trust is legally established. All previous wills are revoked and have been destroyed. Arthur, this is airtight. Robert and Christine will have no legal grounds to claim any inheritance. Susan provided the final confirmation. Storage is secured, insurance policies updated, collection is cataloged, and Arthur, I've already received inquiries from 3 serious collectors. The market value is even higher than our initial projections. That evening, I stood in what was once my elegant living room, now just an empty space with good architecture and bad memories. Leo sat on the floor in the center of the room, playing with his toys in the strange, cavernous acoustics. It looks different now, he noted. Different? How? Bigger, but also sadder. Sadder. Yes, that was precisely it. We had made the house bigger by taking away everything that had made it a home. And in doing so, we had exposed how sad it had become when love was supplanted by expectation, and family had become just another term for financial planning. Leo, how would you feel about making our home somewhere else? A new place? Just for us? He looked up from his toys, pondering this with the gravity of a seasoned philosopher. Would it have a room for all my books? It would have the biggest library you've ever seen, and a garden, just like the one Grandma planted. Even better than Grandma's garden. Then I think that sounds nice. That night, I tucked Leo into his bed in the guest room, which had become his safe haven in this house of empty echoes. Tomorrow, Robert and Christine would return from their scheming trip. Tomorrow, they would learn what it feels like to lose everything you have taken for granted. But tonight, I read Leo's stories of dragons and princesses and valiant knights who protected those they loved. Tonight, I was reminded of why I had spent 40 years building something worth protecting. It was never for the money or the status. It was for quiet evenings like this, with someone who loved me without calculating my net worth, someone who saw me as Grandpa, not as an obstacle to an inheritance. Robert and Christine had forgotten that family is about love, not money. Tomorrow, they would learn the price of that forgetfulness. I had offered them everything, and they had decided it wasn't enough. Now, they would discover what not enough truly looked like. Sunday afternoon, 3:17 p.m. I was in my neighbor Carol Peterson's kitchen, sharing coffee and watching through her window as Robert's BMW turned into my driveway. Leo was upstairs playing with Carol's grandchildren, blessedly unaware that his parents were about to face the true cost of their betrayal. "Arthur, are you certain this is the best way?" Carol asked, her tone gentle but laced with concern. "Perhaps there's a more diplomatic solution." I kept my gaze fixed on the car as Robert and Christine emerged, looking tanned and rested from their Miami plotting session. They moved with the unearned confidence of people who believed they had solved a difficult problem, who had successfully navigated around an inconvenient obstacle. Carol, diplomacy is for individuals who respect boundaries. My son and his wife crossed a line when they started planning my obsolescence. Robert was using his key, Christine following closely with shopping bags, no doubt filled with celebratory purchases made on credit cards they assumed I would dutifully pay off. I watched them push the front door open, heard Robert's voice call out, "Dad, we're home." The silence that answered was absolute. From Carol's kitchen, I had a clear view into what used to be my living room. Robert appeared first, stopping dead in the doorway. His expression shifted from cheerful expectation to utter confusion, then to something bordering on panic. Christine, walking behind him, bumped into his back before stepping around him. Her jaw dropped as she surveyed the vast, empty space where our family life had once unfolded. "What the hell?" Her voice carried clearly across the driveway. They moved through the house like figures in a nightmare, their footsteps echoing in rooms that had been stripped down to their architectural skeletons. I could see them through various windows as they moved from room to room. Robert in the dining room where our antique mahogany table used to stand. Christine in the living room where 40 years of curated art once hung. The brilliance of it was the quietness. No alarm bells, no shattered glass, no indication of forced entry, just absence. The silent, powerful statement that everything they had intended to inherit had simply vanished. My phone vibrated. It was Robert. "Hello, son. How was Miami?" "Dad, what the hell happened to the house? Where is everything?" "What do you mean?" "I mean the house is empty. The furniture, the art, your valuables. Where is it all?" I let the silence hang in the air, watching through the window as he paced in what used to be our family room, running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since he was a boy. "I moved a few things into storage." "A few things?" "Dad, you moved everything into storage. The house looks like it's been robbed." "Funny you should use that word, Robert." Another pause. I could see Christine in the background, frantically yanking open cabinets and closets, searching for anything at all, that might still hold some value. "Dad, I don't understand what's going on. Why would you do this?" "Robert, when was the last time you checked your bank account?" The silence on his end was longer this time. Through the window, I saw him pull out his phone, watched his expression change as he opened his banking app, saw the color drain from his face as he discovered that the joint accounts he used to finance his lifestyle had been closed. "The accounts, they're frozen," he said finally, his voice weak. "No, son, the accounts are closed. Permanently." "You can't do that. I have checks that are about to clear, automatic payments scheduled." "Then I suggest you contact your bank and make arrangements to cover them with your own money." Christine had moved into the kitchen, and I could see her pulling open drawers that now contained nothing but empty space. Her agitated voice carried across the driveway. "Robert, even the silverware is gone." "Dad?" Robert's voice was now tight with a barely suppressed panic. "We need to talk, face to face, right now." "I'm afraid that won't be possible at the moment." "What do you mean it's not possible? Where are you?" "I'm looking after Leo. And speaking of Leo, he told me a very interesting story about the real reason you and Christine went to Miami." This time, the silence was absolute. Through the window, I saw Robert standing frozen in the middle of the empty living room, Christine at his side. They both looked like people who had just realized they were standing in quicksand. "Dad, I can explain." "I'm sure you can, Robert. I'm sure you have a very imaginative explanation for why you told my grandson you were going away to take all my money before I died." He must have misunderstood. Did he also misunderstand your meetings with my attorney? Did he misunderstand your consultations with my banker? Did he misunderstand your research into having me declared legally incompetent? Each question landed like a heavy blow. I could see Robert's posture change, his false confidence crumbling, as the reality sank in that his meticulous planning had not been so secret after all. "Where is Leo?" Christine's voice sharp and demanding. Leo is safe. Leo is with someone who loves him without calculating his inheritance value. He is our son. Yes, I agreed calmly. He is. And you used him as a smokescreen while you plotted to steal his grandfather's inheritance. What kind of parents does that make you? Through the window, I saw Christine grab Robert's arm. They had a brief, frantic, whispered exchange. Then Robert was back on the phone. Dad, whatever you think we were doing, I don't think anything, Robert. I know exactly what you were doing. I have documentation, financial records, legal consultations, even recorded conversations. This last part was a bluff. I had no recordings, but the raw panic in Robert's voice told me the shot had found its mark. We wouldn't. You wouldn't what? You wouldn't meet with my lawyer to discuss probate timelines? You wouldn't consult with my banker to understand inheritance tax law? You wouldn't research the legal process for having an elderly parent declared incompetent? Each accusation was met with dead silence because each one was true. This is insane, Jessica's voice shouting now. He can't just steal everything. Steal? I laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. Christine, my dear, you cannot steal what is already yours. This is my house, my money, my property. I haven't stolen a thing. I have simply rearranged my priorities. What do you want? Robert's voice was defeated. What do you want us to do? I want you to understand something fundamental, Robert. You spent your childhood taking my love for granted. You spent your adult life taking my financial support for granted. And now, you were planning to spend my final years taking my death for granted. Through the window, I could see them both slumped in the empty living room, the crushing weight of their miscalculation finally settling upon them. But here's what you forgot, I continued, my voice steady and cold. I didn't build this fortune by being a fool. I didn't survive 20 years as a widower by being weak. And I certainly didn't raise you on my own by being someone who could be easily discarded when it became convenient. Dad, please, I'm not finished. You wanted everything I had built. Fine. Now you have precisely what you've earned. Nothing. The house you are sitting in is being sold. The money you expected to inherit is now in Leo's education fund. The business empire you plan to liquidate is being donated to charity in your grandmother's name. I could hear Christine sobbing now, the sound drifting across the driveway like the wind through an empty house. You can't do this to us, Robert whispered. I didn't do this to you, son. You did this to yourselves the moment you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive. I ended the call and leaned back in Carol's kitchen chair, watching through the window as my son and his wife confronted the stark reality of their choices. They remained in the empty living room for another hour, making frantic phone calls, arguing, occasionally wandering through the house as if hoping to find something they had overlooked. But there was nothing left to find. I had been thorough. Leo came downstairs around 5:00 p.m., asking if we could go home. I looked at this innocent child, who had no idea his simple confession had triggered the utter annihilation of his parents' future. Actually, Leo, how would you like to stay here with Carol tonight? We could have a sleepover. And tomorrow, we can go look at some new houses. New houses? I think it's time for us to have a fresh start, somewhere that's just ours. Through the window, I watched Robert and Christine finally depart, their car pulling out of the driveway like a funeral procession. They would be back tomorrow, likely with lawyers armed with demands, threats, and accusations. But it was too late. I had moved faster, planned better, and most importantly, I understood something they had long forgotten. Family isn't about blood or shared DNA. Family is about loyalty, about love, about choosing to protect one another instead of exploiting one another. They had chosen exploitation. I had chosen protection. The result of those choices was currently sitting in an empty house with no furniture, no money, and no future they had planned. I had given them exactly what they had given me. Nothing. Monday morning, as expected, brought lawyers. 3 of them, to be precise, trailing Robert and Christine like expensive shadows as they marched up to Carol Peterson's front door. Leo and I were having breakfast, watching cartoons. I had anticipated this. When you systematically erase someone's entire expected future, they tend to retaliate with legal threats and dramatic confrontations. I had prepared accordingly. Mr. Pendleton, the lead attorney, a man named Martin Sinclair, began as Carol reluctantly showed them into her living room. I'm representing Robert and Christine Pendleton. We need to discuss the illegal transfer of assets that took place over the weekend. I adjusted my tie and offered a smile, the same smile that had once made powerful men reconsider hostile takeover attempts. I'm not familiar with any illegal transfers, Mr. Sinclair. Perhaps you could be more specific. You transferred assets valued in the millions of dollars without providing proper notification to the beneficiaries. I transferred my own assets, I interrupted gently, which I am legally permitted to do, with or without notifying anyone. Robert stepped forward, his face flushed with a mixture of rage and humiliation. Dad, this is ridiculous. You can't just... Robert, my voice was calm, but carried the authority of a man who had spent 40 years making men twice his size back down. You will not raise your voice in Mrs. Peterson's home. You will not make demands, and you will remember that I am still your father, even if you have forgotten how to be my son. Christine shoved past the lawyers, her carefully constructed composure finally shattering. You vindictive old man! You can't steal our inheritance! The silence that followed was heavy and profound. Even Leo glanced up from his cartoons, sensing the sudden chill in the room. I rose slowly, my movements measured and deliberate, and walked until I was standing directly in front of Christine. At 65, I was still 2 inches taller than her and had 40 years more experience in handling people who mistake kindness for weakness. Christine, I said quietly, you just made a grave error. What error? You just called me old and vindictive in front of multiple witnesses, including your own son. You just admitted that you view my assets as your inheritance while I am still very much alive. And most importantly, you have just demonstrated precisely why you are deserving of nothing. I turned to Leo, who was watching this adult spectacle with wide, confused eyes. Leo, my boy, would you mind going upstairs to play with Carol's grandchildren? The adults need to have a private conversation. After he had gone, I turned back to the assembled legal team and my estranged family. Now then, let's discuss what is actually happening. Mr. Sinclair, your clients have retained you under false pretenses. They claim I have stolen assets that belong to them, but those assets have never belonged to them. They belong to me, as evidenced by 40 years of tax returns, property deeds, and exhaustive legal documentation. Mr. Pendleton, while that may be technically legal, the timing and manner of these transfers suggests... Mr. Sinclair, I cut him off. Are you implying that a man of sound mind does not have the right to dispose of his own property as he sees fit? The lawyer faltered. This was the trap I had laid, and he was walking right into it. If you are questioning my mental competency, I continued, I have current psychological evaluations from Dr. Evelyn Reed. Would you care to review them? I produced the documents Dr. Reed had prepared, comprehensive evaluations that not only confirmed my mental competence, but also my superior cognitive function for my age. Furthermore, I went on, savoring the slow evaporation of their confidence. I have documentation of your client's attempts to manipulate my estate planning, their meetings with my attorney, their consultations with my banker, their research into the legal procedures for having elderly parents declared incompetent. Robert's face went pale. How did you? How did I know, Robert? I have been protecting this family's assets since before you could walk. Did you truly believe you could conspire against me without my finding out? I walked to Carol's window and looked across at the house where I had raised Robert, where he learned to walk, to talk, and apparently to plot against the man who gave him everything. You want to know what's vindictive? I asked, turning back to them. Vindictive is a son who looks at his father and sees only an obstacle to an inheritance. Vindictive is a daughter-in-law who refers to the man who welcomed her into his family as expired. Vindictive is using a 7-year-old child as cover while you plot to steal his grandfather's life savings. We weren't stealing, Robert mumbled. You were planning to have me declared incompetent so you could gain control of my assets while I was still alive, I stated flatly. What would you call that? The room was silent, save for the sound of Christine's quiet sniffling and the lawyers shuffling papers they were now realizing were useless. Here is what is going to happen, I said. You are going to leave Mrs. Peterson's home. You are going to return to your empty house. You are going to figure out how to pay your bills with money you have actually earned instead of money you expected to inherit. And you are going to learn to live with the consequences of treating your family like a business transaction. What about Leo? Christine demanded. What about him? He's our son. You can't just take him. I'm not taking him. I am protecting him from parents who taught him that love is conditional on an inheritance, from parents who used him as a pawn in their schemes, from parents who prioritized money over family. I produced one final document. This one was from Child Protective Services, detailing concerns about Leo's emotional well-being in a home where financial strain had created an unstable environment. Mr. Pendleton has been granted temporary guardianship pending a full custody evaluation, the social worker had written. The child expressed feeling safer and more secure in his grandfather's care. This is insane, Robert said, but his voice lacked any real conviction. He was beginning to grasp the full extent of what I had accomplished in a few short days. What's insane, I replied, is a 38-year-old man who has never earned an honest dollar in his life, feeling entitled to his father's fortune. What's insane is spending your inheritance before the person has even died. What's insane is forgetting that the man who built everything you wanted to take is still very much alive and still very much in control. The lawyers were already retreating toward the door, recognizing a lost cause. Mr. Pendleton, Sinclair said carefully, if your clients wish to pursue this. Mr. Sinclair, I interrupted. Your clients have no matter to pursue. They have no legal standing, no legitimate claim, and no case. What they have is a very expensive lesson in why you should not try to rob a man who is smarter, more experienced, and significantly more ruthless than you are. After they had gone, Carol and I sat in her kitchen. Upstairs, Leo was playing, blissfully unaware that his entire life had just been fundamentally restructured. Arthur, Carol said gently, are you sure this was the only way? I looked across at the empty house that had once been filled with so much love and laughter, now echoing with nothing but broken dreams and costly mistakes. Carol, Some people can be taught with a quiet conversation. Others require more dramatic instruction. My son and his wife chose to ignore every gentle lesson life offered them about respect, gratitude, and loyalty. Now, they get to learn the hard way what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. Through the window, I could see them loading boxes into their car, likely packing the few personal effects I had left behind. Soon they would be gone, and the house would be truly empty, waiting for new owners who might fill it with genuine love instead of calculated greed. I had lost a son, but I had gained clarity. I had lost a daughter-in-law, but I had gained peace. I had lost the illusion of family, but I had gained the reality of love. Leo was upstairs, safe and sound, learning that family means protection, not exploitation. That was a trade I would make every single time. 6 weeks later, I sat in my new home, a beautiful colonial in the next town over, with a library Leo adored, and a garden we were planning together, reading the society section of the local paper with a certain grim satisfaction. The headlines told the story more eloquently than I ever could. Local couple files for bankruptcy following family dispute. Pendleton estate sale draws unprecedented collector interest. Custody battle ends with grandfather awarded full guardianship. But the real story was in the whispers. The hushed conversations at country club luncheons, the suddenly unreturned phone calls, the social invitations that had ceased to arrive. Robert and Christine had discovered a hard truth about borrowed wealth. When it vanishes, so do the people who were only ever interested in what it could buy. Susan Hayes had kept me informed of their decline with the detached reporting of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of many local fortunes. Robert had to get a job, she told me over coffee in my new kitchen. Sales position at a car dealership. And Christine? She's working at a boutique downtown. Not as a manager, just a sales clerk. They aren't adjusting well. Very poorly, in fact. There had been an incident at the country club. Apparently, Christine had a public meltdown when her membership was revoked for non-payment. I could easily picture it. Christine, who had built her entire identity on an association with wealth she never earned, discovering that without the money, social standing evaporates like frost in the morning sun. What kind of meltdown? The kind that requires security to be called and involves very public tears. She kept screaming that it wasn't fair, that the money should have been hers. Even in their ruin, they couldn't grasp that wealth is not an automatic entitlement. It is earned, built, and defended by those who understand its true value. And Robert? Drinking heavily. He showed up at the old house last week, tried to convince the new owners to let him in, claimed he'd forgotten something important. What had he forgotten? I don't think it was an object, Arthur. I think he was looking for something he can never get back. The old house had sold quickly to a young family with small children, who saw it as a fresh start, not an empty shell. I had watched them move in from a distance, carrying boxes filled with hopes instead of disappointments, filling the rooms with laughter instead of echoes. Leo adapted to our new life with the resilience of a child and the quiet wisdom of one who had learned early on to distinguish between people who loved him and people who used him. "Grandpa," he asked one evening as we tended to our new garden, "do you miss Mommy and Daddy?" It was the question I had been dreading. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that love is not always unconditional? That sometimes protecting someone means removing them from your life? "I miss the people I thought they were," I answered honestly, "but I do not miss the people they chose to become." Do they miss us? This was harder. Despite everything, I knew Robert missed the security I provided, the safety net he had always taken for granted. Christine missed the lifestyle she had never earned, but had come to expect. But did they miss us as people? or merely as a source of funds and convenience? I think they miss what we could give them more than they miss who we are. Leo considered this with the solemnity of a much older soul. That's sad. Yes, little man. It is very sad. The custody hearing had been swift and conclusive. Robert and Christine appeared with a legal aid attorney who was clearly outmatched by the team I had assembled. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Financial irresponsibility, emotional manipulation, using their child as a pawn in an inheritance scheme. The judge's words were precise and damning. The court finds that the minor child's best interests are served by remaining in the custody of his paternal grandfather, who has demonstrated both the financial stability and the emotional commitment necessary to provide appropriate care. Robert broke down in the courtroom, but I realized his tears were not from grief. They were from the final, crushing understanding that he had lost everything: money, status, respect, and now his son entirely through his own actions. Christine had simply walked out halfway through the judge's summary. Now, sitting in my new kitchen, with the afternoon sun streaming through windows that looked out onto a garden Leo and I were building together, I felt something I had not experienced in decades: peace. My phone rang as I was preparing dinner. Robert's number. I had kept it active but had been ignoring his calls for weeks. This time, for some reason, I answered. "Hello, Robert." "Dad." His voice was broken, hollow. We need help." "What kind of help?" "Money. Just enough to get back on our feet. I'll pay you back, I swear. I'll do whatever you want." I looked out the window at Leo, who was in the garden with his new friend from next door, both of them laughing as they chased butterflies among the rose bushes. "Robert," I said gently, "what you need isn't money. What you need is to learn how to live without expecting someone else to solve your problems." "Dad, please. I'm your son." "Yes," I agreed. "You are. And I raised you to be better than this. I can change. We can change. Perhaps you can. But that change has to come from you, not from my money fixing your problems once again." The silence stretched between us, filled with 40 years of love, disappointment, hope, and now, finality. "I love you, Robert. I will always love you. But I will never again mistake enabling your poor choices for helping you grow." I hung up the phone and walked outside to join Leo in the garden, where real growth was happening in soil we had prepared together, in sunshine that belonged to both of us, in a future built on love instead of expectation. Some flowers, I thought, bloom best after the weeds have been pulled. 1 year later, I stood in my kitchen, preparing Leo's lunch for his first day at his new school. I listened to him chatter excitedly about meeting new friends, and whether his teacher would like the apple he had picked from our very own tree. At 66, I had learned a vital lesson. Starting over isn't about discarding what you've built. It's about building something better with the wisdom you've gained. Our new house had become a home in a way the old one never had. Every piece of furniture was chosen for comfort, not status. Every room was designed for living, not for impressing guests. The art on our walls told stories of places we had visited together, rather than displaying wealth for others to envy. Leo had grown 3 inches, and had gained the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are loved without condition. His laughter filled rooms that had never known the calculated silences of people plotting one another's obsolescence. "Grandpa, will you pick me up from school today?" "Of course, little man. We'll get ice cream, and you can tell me everything you learned. Everything you want to share." This was the distinction between love and control, between family and financial planning. Leo shared because he trusted me, not because he feared the repercussions of disappointing me. After dropping him off, I took a drive past our old neighborhood. The house had been completely transformed by the new owners, painted a cheerful yellow instead of the somber gray Robert had insisted on. Toys were scattered across a lawn that had once been manicured to sterile perfection. I felt no nostalgia for what was lost, only a profound sense of relief for what we had escaped. My phone buzzed. A text from Susan Hayes. Thought you'd want to know. Robert and Christine are divorcing. She filed yesterday. Cited financial incompatibility. Financial incompatibility. The clinical term for what happens when a relationship built on shared greed runs out of money. I wasn't surprised. When the greed was no longer profitable, there was nothing left to bind them together. Another text came through, this one from Eleanor Vance. Leo's trust fund has grown by 12% this year. College is fully funded, with enough left over for graduate school. This was how wealth was meant to function, not as a weapon or a tool for manipulation, but as a foundation for opportunity. Leo would grow up knowing his education was secure, but also that his value as a human being was not measured by his bank account. That afternoon, I picked Leo up from school and listened to him talk about his new teacher, his new friends, and the book they were reading about dragons and brave knights. Grandpa, why do the knights always have to fight the dragons? I don't think they always do, little man. I think sometimes the dragons just need to be reminded that they're not the only powerful creatures in the kingdom. Are you a dragon or a knight? I considered his question with genuine seriousness. I think perhaps I am both. A dragon who guards his treasure, and a knight who defends the people he loves. What's your treasure? You are, Leo. You are the only treasure that truly matters. That evening, after Leo was asleep, I sat in my study, writing in a journal I had started. It wasn't a log of financial transactions or legal victories, but a record of quiet moments, small triumphs, and the daily accumulation of peace. Tonight's entry read, Leo received a gold star on his math homework. He's making friends easily, the way children do when they aren't burdened by adult anxieties about money and status. I am teaching him to garden, and he is teaching me to see butterflies as more important than bank statements. Robert called again last week. I let it go to voicemail. He sounded sober, which is progress, but he was asking for money, which is not. Christine, according to Susan, has moved back in with her parents. They are learning what I learned 40 years ago. Survival means building something real, not just inheriting something built by someone else. I do not forgive them. Forgiveness would imply that their actions were forgivable, and some betrayals are too calculated, too cruel to be excused. But I no longer carry anger. Anger is a heavy burden, and at 66, I have better things to carry. I carry the sound of Leo's laughter. I carry the memory of my wife's hands planting roses. I carry the satisfaction of building something that will last beyond my lifetime. Not money, but values. Not an inheritance, but integrity. They wanted everything I had built. They ended up with nothing I created. The difference between those two is the difference between taking and making, between inheriting and earning, between being given a legacy and being worthy of one. Tomorrow, Leo and I are going to plant apple trees. By the time he is my age, they will be strong and tall, providing shade for his own grandchildren. That is the kind of planning that matters. Not how to acquire wealth, but how to grow something worth passing down. At 66, I finally grasped what my wife meant when she said the best inheritance is one that makes the inheritor better, not just richer. Leo will inherit money. Yes. But more importantly, he will inherit the understanding that family means protection, not exploitation, and that love is earned through character, not claimed through blood. I did not lose a son last year. I lost the illusion that biology creates loyalty. What I gained was clarity, peace, and the knowledge that some battles are worth fighting, not because you seek victory, but because victory protects something precious. Robert and Christine learned that when you try to bury a phoenix, you had better make sure it is truly dead. They learned that money is like water. It flows toward those who know how to channel it and away from those who take it for granted. Most importantly, they learned that some men get more formidable with age, not less. That wisdom is sharper than youth, that experience is stronger than entitlement, and that grandfathers who have survived everything life can throw at them are not people you want as enemies. I am 66 years old. I am dignified. I am content, and I am absolutely ruthless when threatened. I have raised a grandson who knows the difference between love and manipulation, built a life based on genuine affection rather than financial obligation, and created a legacy that will endure long after I am gone. They wanted everything. I gave them exactly what they deserved. Nothing. And I sleep better at night than I have in 20 years. I closed the journal and walked upstairs to check on Leo, sleeping peacefully in a room filled with books and dreams instead of schemes and disappointments. Tomorrow we would plant those apple trees. Tomorrow I would continue building something worth inheriting. Tomorrow I would wake up in a house filled with love instead of calculation. At 66, I had learned the most important lesson of my life. The best revenge is not getting even. It is building a life so beautiful that your enemies realize they were never worthy of being part of it. They had wanted my death to solve their problems. Instead, my life became the solution to problems I didn't even know I had. I had lost a son and gained a future. I had lost an inheritance and gained a legacy. And that, I thought as I turned off the lights, was the best trade I had ever made. Arthur's story is a powerful reminder that our worth is not defined by others, and that true strength often lies in quiet resolve. If this journey resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to Hidden Wounds and press the notification bell for more stories that uncover the strength within all of us. Your story matters, and it's time to tell it on your own terms.